Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Joe Davis from Southern New Hampshire University. We're CJ 300. We're in Module 4. We're going to take a look at Milestone number 2, the literature analysis, perhaps what sometimes was referred to as a review of the literature. Okay, so if we take a look at what we're going to talk about today, this is all there is in the PowerPoint. We're going to review the guidelines and rubric. Please pay close attention to that. Then I'm going to show you two sample papers. They're identical. The difference is the first one where it says outline, I went through the sample paper and matched each portion of it to the requirements of the rubric so you can see where they fit in. The second one is a completed or finished paper so that it all flows. A brief look at the guidelines and rubrics for milestone number 2. You can read all this stuff. It says in milestone 3 you completed a worksheet, okay, with an annotated bibliography, and that's what we are going to expand upon today. You need 5 peer-reviewed scholarly articles for your final project. I had someone email me the other day and question where I got that you have to use the Shapiro library and that you have to use peer-reviewed articles. It's straight out of Module 3 in the assignment. So anyway, you did this annotated bibliography. Now we're going to complete that literature analysis. You're going to do more than just hit the highlights of it. So you need your 5 articles that identify common themes. What is it that links these 5 articles together, which of course links to your issue? Then you need the explanation of both the advantages, you need an explanation of the advantages for both qualitative and quantitative research methodology. Then the next bullet point is you need the disadvantages of both qualitative and quantitative. So here are your specific instructions. If you haven't watched those 3 videotapes, they were in an earlier module, in Module 3. Here are the 3 links to them now. They're a little bit older. The professor is from England, so he has some different phrasing. The content is excellent. Bear with him, and it takes 25 minutes to watch all 3. If this whole idea of research, true research, and reviewing literature or analyzing what's out there is new to you, he does a darn good job of laying it out for you in 25 minutes. Okay? So I just think it would be worth it. Item number 2, it says make any needed improvements to your annotated bibliographies. Those are the papers that I have returned to you. If you haven't gotten that one submitted, you really can't move forward. Well, you can. You shouldn't. Put it that way, okay? Number 3, for each article, okay? Now for each article, so you're going to have 5 sets of these. Use your notes from the article summary. That's part of last module's assignment. Portion of the annotated bibliography to write 1 to 3 paragraph summary of what the author said in the article. How what the author said relates to your project issue, and how the article relates to other articles, those common themes. Okay, in other words, organize your notes from the worksheet into a paragraph. You have a real strong outline. Number 4, for each article, write a 1 or 2 paragraph explanation of the advantages of the research method. So you have at least 1 each for qualitative and quantitative. Making informed decisions about how to address the project issue. Be sure to name the research method used on the article. Okay. As an example, then you might consider the degree to which the research was conducted ethically. That might be one of the advantages. Okay, and then the opposite is true. We're going to do the same process over again, but you're going to look at the disadvantages and consider, for example, it says potential flaws in the soundness of the research. Number 6, use the citations from your annotated bibliography to create a reference section following APA style guidelines. The guidelines for submission are your analysis must be submitted with double-spaced 12-point Times New Roman or a similar font, but 12-point, 1-inch margins, and of course APA format. Okay, here is the paper that I referred to as the outline paper. And what I tried to do to help you is, here's what the requirement is. Article summary, and this is straight out of the rubric. Use your notes from the article summary portion of the annotated bibliography to write a 1 to 3 paragraph summary of what the author said in the article, how what the author said relates to your project issue, and how the article relates to your other articles, common themes. In other words, organize your notes from the worksheet into a paragraph. This may require developing an introductory sentence and a summary sentence. Now, the way I elected to do this is to show you the citation for the article first. I understand that the requirement says to have a reference section at the end. It doesn't. There's nothing wrong with putting this at the beginning also. It just, I thought, was good for all of you to see APA format one more time. All right, so we have this article written by Dr. Holmes, and it says the sleeper effect of intimate partner violence exposure. Long-term consequences on young children's aggressive behavior. It came from the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry. 54 is the volume, 986 to 995 are the pages. Now, looking at that first paragraph, according to Holmes, children who have been exposed to intimate partner violence, IPV, experience a wide variety of short-term social adjustments and emotional difficulties, including externalizing behavior problems such as aggression. While children are affected by IPV at all ages, little is known about the long-term consequences of IPV exposure at younger ages. Because early experiences provide the foundation for later development, children exposed to IPV as an infant or toddler may experience worse negative outcomes over time than other children, than children never exposed. And the source of that is Holmes. That's what Holmes wrote about. Okay? My issue is the impact among children between the ages of 4 and 7 years old of witnessing domestic violence in their home. In his article, Dr. Holmes's research specifically addressed the issue. The results reported in the article provide support for the theory that young children who have witnessed IPV indicate long-term negative behavior effect on children, though additional research is required. The second article, The Impact of Intimate Partner Violence and Additional Traumatic Events on Trauma Symptoms and PTSD in Preschool-Aged Children, supports Holmes's finding. Specifically, Graham Berman and others also found that children exposed to IPV are at increased risk of developing traumatic stress symptoms and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Their research also pointed out that children experience IPV are often exposed to additional traumatic events, and that little is known about the impact of these additional traumas on children's functioning. In reviewing the research in these two articles regarding witnessing IPV as a young child, there is evidence to support long-term consequences. However, there isn't sufficient evidence to substantiate specific findings. The next part was, what are the advantages of the research method? Holmes's research utilized quantitative research methods, specifically the use of the National Survey of Child and Adolescent Well-Being. By using latent growth curve modeling, they were able to examine whether early IPV exposure affects the development of aggressive behavior over 5 years. The use of qualitative methods was important because it allowed for empirical exploration of the research question. Holmes selected measures that included definitions of child aggressive behavior and exposure to IPV from reliable and accepted sources. Quantitative data also provided the researchers with empirical data that could be utilized with different variables. Hope I didn't misspeak earlier in that bit. This is the quantitative one. The disadvantages of the research methods. As with any research project, the use of quantitative methods isn't without limitations or disadvantages. According to Holmes, the NSCAW weights are highly variant whole sample weights, meaning that they may not be appropriate for the use with small subsamples. This study only involved 446 children, which meant the effect of the sample weights were estimated on the substandard error. The results indicated that the individual weights had a large effect on the standard error and therefore were not used in the analysis. All right, we go on to the next article. This one has a lot of authors. It's Graham Berman, Castro, Miller, and Howell. The impact of intimate partner violence and additional traumatic events on trauma symptoms and PTSD in preschool-aged children. Journal of Traumatic Stress, Volume 25, pages 393 to 400. Okay, according to Graham Berman and others, children exposed to IPV are at an increased risk for developing traumatic stress symptoms and post-traumatic stress disorder. The research also revealed children who witnessed IPV are often exposed to additional traumatic events. Little is known about the impact of these additional traumas on children's functioning. My issue is the impact among children between the ages of 4 to 7 years old of witnessing domestic violence in their home. Graham Berman's work supports that premise and provides significant insight into a closely related and under-researched issue, exposure to additional traumatic events. That is significant because without considering that variable, basic research could have research bias. In the first article, The Sleeper Effects of Intimate Partner Violence Exposure, Long-Term Consequences on Young Children's Aggressive Behavior, Holmes supported Graham Berman's findings. The extension of exposure from only IPV to include other traumatic events is significant. As previously mentioned, the type and frequency of additional traumatic events could be equal to or more significant than IPV. In reviewing the research in these two articles regarding witnessing IPV as a young child, there is evidence to support long-term consequences. However, there isn't sufficient evidence to substantiate specific findings. What are the advantages? Graham Berman research utilized qualitative research methods. Specifically, they recruited Midwestern state women in low-income housing units, mental health agencies, and stores, or by announcements to parents in newsletters, newspaper ads, and assistance from the Department of Social Services. These women were provided a toll-free number to learn more information. After selection, the participants were interviewed at the time and location of their choice. The 1.5-hour interviews were conducted by psychologists and graduate and undergraduate research assistants trained in interviewing skills. The training included research ethics and clinical interviewing with at-risk population. Standardized measures were administered in structured interview format to include women with a range of reading abilities. And those were the advantages. The disadvantages, the advantages listed above are formidable but not without disadvantages. Because the subject matter of the interviews and the background and demographics of the subject was unique, there doesn't appear to be an appropriate correlation to the interviewers. In particular, the subjects were very low income and victims of multiple IPV events. While impossible to ameliorate all variables, the use of interviews with a broad spectrum of research assistance could result in validity issues. Now I hope that helps, and then of course here's where your references would go. Okay, as promised, this is sample paper Milestone 2 4-1, and this is the paper. So all I say to you here is that the idea is I'm trying to provide you a template or a guide so that you can spend your time and energy working on your paper rather than worrying about format on it. The content is exactly the same as in the outline, except here it's presented as a final paper, as your paper would look. I hope that helps and gives you an idea. Please let me know if you need assistance on this. Keep those cards and letters coming.